to Ahead of the Games, where we're going to talk about the R1 and using it for sport. I'm Mike Burnhill. I've been at Canon for 15 years looking after professional products such as the R1, 1DX series, etc. And I've been to many of the world's biggest sporting events. But with me is someone who knows more about sports than me, Richard Heathcote, Chief Photographer of Getty, I believe. That's your title?
Yeah, I'm one of the chief sport photographers for Getty Images based here in Europe.
So, pop quiz. How many World Cups?
Yeah, now I have to think. So it took 1, 2, 3, 4, 6.
6. How many Olympics?
7, including winters, yeah.
How many Formula 1?
1.
Something I beat him at. Okay. So we've known each other, I'm trying to think when we met, maybe 13 years ago. You tested the 1DX, 1DX2, 1DX3, R3, R5, and I think you were probably one of the very first in the world to test the R1.
Yeah.
And I remember when you picked it up, you were really sort of smitten and kind of super excited. What do you remember from that first test?
You know, when the R3 came out, and it was brilliant, very good, but you kind of knew or were hoping that the feedback would go back into it. When you first picked up that R1, you could feel that evolution almost straight away. You know, the size of the viewfinder is incredible. That's the interaction point of a photographer with a camera, really. And the ergonomics were right. Things had been refined. The autofocus, especially under like low light, with different subjects, was just unbelievable. A big leap. You know, it's fantastic at just snapping on to any athlete in almost any lighting condition, especially in poor lights. You know, we shoot under a lot of artificial light. We shoot under a lot of top-heavy lighting. Just to be able to have trust that the AF is on the subject regardless of who it is and just nail it all the way through a sequence, it has become so important. And that's what's become one of the most initially so impressive things about the R1 and its performance. It's important that you play and you get your settings right. You know, when you find settings, you use them and you trust them, and then you enjoy using the camera more, you get more out of it, you get better results. Predominantly, I use front button focus.
Okay.
A lot of people, switch either front or rear. I do use rear button focus on certain sports in certain situations, especially say a situation where I don't need focus as much. You know, say if I'm doing some panning or something like that, where I don't really need to change the focus too much. But most of the time, 95% of the time, I'm front button focus, and I use the single AF point, but with face tracking to cover the whole area. Okay. So I start with not the tiniest of squares with a single dot, but the small dots. The standard dot. Well, the standard square, sorry. And I put that over the subject I want and just let the tracking go with it. And I have no issues with the way it just sticks on the person I want it to. One of my other cameras, like football, 70 to 200 goalmouth, I'll actually use it the other way round, where I'll have no face tracking running. Purely from a sort of shoot and goal perspective, I know where I want that focus point to be. And then as soon as I need face tracking, I have it activated on a button.
You mentioned to me once about using sort of zones for boxing, which is another thing you do a lot of. Yeah.
So the larger zone squares, I'll keep it on either the right side, the middle, or the left. I'll use the smart controller to just flick that left to right.
You're still using face tracking?
Using face tracking within that zone.
Yeah.
But it's just making sure that I want it to face track in that particular area.
Yeah.
So I want it to face track the athlete on the right, or I want it to face track the athlete on the left. Yeah. So I'm always making the decision. I know what I want in focus in the frame, but I'm using the zones and the different size of zones to do the job I need it to do. Another good example is I did a remote picture at the Olympics in 2024, and I actually used the zone AF on the remote. It was actually tracking along a rail camera.
Yeah.
And I used the zone, like one of the longer, thinner zones, to make sure that the focus stayed on the lower half of the frame the whole time. It never jumped to the crowd in the background.
Okay, yeah.
So I actually used that long, thin, lower AF zone to
Yeah.
make sure it stayed along the line of athletes,
Yeah.
and trusted that it picked the right athlete, which it did 90% of the time.
I've seen someone do something similar with the head on and just having a thin line.
Yeah.
And basically it would track whoever was first in that thin
Yes,
line
exactly.
as they come along. Yeah.
So again, it's understanding how good those zones are and how they work, and then use them in the right situation.
Yeah, and then the zone I think is underestimated because it's customizable in the shape. You can basically put the zone in the rough area, and then subject tracking will pick up that particular subject within that area. So you don't have to be 100% precise with the points. I know some people like skiing, it's like trying to keep that AF point as the subject moves around. So using something like the assist points or a zone can be a good starting guide. And as you get more and more skill, then you can obviously...
Yeah, I mean, if you have like an erratic subject through the frame that you know roughly where it's going to be, then you use the zone. You know, if you have an erratic subject through the frame that you know is going to move from across here and you're not quite sure if you're going to be able to keep the AF point, then using that expanded AF points is helping you, making sure it's locking on to that subject more and more.
So obviously another feature of the R1 that's new is the little padlock icon on the AF modes. Do you use those?
I do. I use them only for certain things. They're the almost like the old school original.
Yeah, that's my pictures. A DSLR kind of old school focusing point. It stays where you put it and it doesn't track. And then you turn it off to the same icon without the padlock. It's the AF with all the AF magic.
Another good use for those is that if you're on back button focus, you're not actually going to focus that much. You want certain subjects in a certain spot, it's never going to move. You don't want the AF to wander off or maybe potentially grab a face that is very close but not the one you want. So it's good in certain situations. It's very handy for things like portraiture and studio work as well. But it's also then understanding that the newer AF shapes, patterns are actually fantastic and really good. And you find yourself using the older locked off method less and less and less and less because you trust the camera more. You trust that the camera now understands better the subject you want in focus. It's tracking the right person almost all the time. And it just builds your confidence. It builds your trust in that the camera's doing exactly what you want it to do to get the result you want.
We talked previously about shooting at low light and how much better the R1 was. Have you really noticed that in sort of the situations, different sports, etc.? Yeah,
you do. You notice it the most when you're shooting in very poor light. You notice it the most when you're shooting, say, like a subject that has a lot less contrast in the face to the kit they're wearing. If they're lit poorly, that's always been a tough subject to get sharp and be consistent on. And just the R1 has just been absolutely outstanding in you go and shoot like a lower league football match, or you go and shoot at a ground that hasn't got modern floodlights, or you go and shoot in a venue that's a temporary venue somewhere, or you're shooting a feature or something like that, and you just have to deal with the lighting situation you have in front of you. It's not a full stadium with full lighting. And just the ability to just grab and hold on to the face, and especially the eyes, has been incredible. Yeah.
And I think that comes down to the sort of secret sort of thing of the R1, which is the cross-type AF, where we've managed to twist every sort of fourth pixel. So we've got 6 million cross-type points, which really gives us an amazing ability in low light versus something like 155 in the 1DX3. Have you ever noticed this feature?
So notice the camera's much, much better in low lights, yes. But
that's the technology working for
exactly,
you, see?
Yeah, but it's one of those things that when it works straight away, you're like, well, that's brilliant. Yeah. And then subconsciously you're like, oh, that works, next, move on. You can concentrate on taking the picture.
Well, this is the best part of technology, when it happens in the background and you don't actually see it and it just does what you expect it to do. With all mirrorless cameras, one of the big things is like subject detection, people, animals, vehicles. Do you ever use this for sports?
Yes, I literally have people with subject detect on the whole time. It's just on the whole time.
I remember in the initial stage with the R5, there was some like skepticism.
But again, I think that's down to the evolution of the technology and the amount of work that has gone into the feedback that has made the system better. Initially, I think everyone was worried about, what happens when a head turns away and you don't see the face, you only see the back of the head, or you see the side of the head.
Yeah.
Or if, in sport, athletes wear baseball caps in a lot of sports, so that's covering a high portion of the face. Now with the R1, it stays on that face. It doesn't matter if the head's turned, 90 degrees, 180 degrees even, it always seems to just hold that. It's very, very good at recognizing that's a head. And when the face comes around, it sees the face as part of the head. And when the eyes are in view, it then goes to the eyes. And that really stands out.
Yeah, and that's again down to we've rebuilt that whole database. So the R5 was really portraity, so it's looking for eyes, mouth, head, the standard. But then we realized for sports, sometimes in some sports you could be upside down, gymnastics, or you may not even see the head. So having to recognize a body and knowing the brown thing at the top should be where the head is. So identifying a human in any orientation has really kind of been built into the system, which really, again, demonstrates what you've been talking about. One interesting area in the R1 that you did talk to me about, we did talk about this, was the face registration.
So it's one of the first things we talked about. And I started playing with it at events where you have a lot of crowd very, very close to the subject. Golf is a good example. You have banks of crowds of people very close to the golfer. They often put their head down, they're wearing a baseball cap. Traditional old school face detect, it would jump to any face it thought was the right person.
Yeah.
But with this, it's brilliant. It just grabs and it holds. And again, it's because you can prioritize the people. You're not always photographing the same person in sport.
No.
Something like a football match. There's 22 players on the field at any point. But in certain situations where say you're doing like a wide angle picture and you're down low and you're not necessarily have your face up against the viewfinder, so you're using the screen. If you've got that face detected, and there's 30, 40 people in the frame, maybe 10 people in the frame, whatever, and that person's going to move. They're not going to be standing still. You can trust that it's going to hold on to that person. I think its ability is amazing. We have clients that, sponsor certain athletes, sponsor certain players. If your job for that client is to only photograph a certain person, we just register their face, because it just gives you the ability to kind of, again, like we were talking about, with the card detector, it's literally be a bit more creative. You're trusting the camera. The camera's so good at this particular feature.
So I remember during the AF test that we did, when we first had the prototype R1, one thing we were super excited to test was the sort of action priority mode. Yep. Where it would track either, was it football, basketball, and volleyball. So we got to try the football. Do you remember any of those shocking when we first tried it out?
Yeah, it's quite interesting because, when, as a seasoned sports photographer, I know how I want to frame and shoot my short lens gold mouth pictures. And generally, again, I don't use face tracking on that particular camera. What I do is I have it at a certain point, I put that point where I want it, and then I'll use the face tracking when the subject runs to me. To try it out was really interesting because, it essentially is tracking, it's predicting where the football is going, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a process that's obviously going to get better and better. And the more information it gets fed back to it, the system's going to be even better. It's what it is a fantastic feature for someone who hasn't really shot those sports very much. I've not really shot a great deal of volleyball or a great deal of basketball, only at something like the Olympics. So would I have a play with that and use that in those scenarios? Yeah, I probably would, see, because it's going to potentially do better than I can. I think that's the other thing that's key here, is getting the right person in focus.
Yeah.
And
that decides whether the image is sellable or not.
It decides if it's the picture you want. Ultimately, you want the subject to be the right subject in focus. If it's not, then even if it's someone else in focus, it's out of focus. The picture's out of focus.
Yeah.
And as a photographer, do I always get it right? No. Have I often put the AF point on the wrong person, or and got it wrong? Yes. We all make mistakes. Everyone's human. So it's interesting to see how well the technology stacks up.
Yeah. You know, the technology is all based on certain sports and certain scenarios, the most difficult scenarios. And we're looking at the probability of where that ball is and who's going to be the nearest person to the ball, because they're going to hit it. So if it goes across a goal, is it the guy on the front post, the defender? Is it the goalkeeper's going to punch it away? Or is it the guy on the back post? And the system is looking at the probability of the position of the ball and the nearest player. And then one other little new feature of the R5 Mark II and the R1 is a new AF saving settings.
Yes.
Have you tried that yet?
Yes.
Do you have it named for different sports?
I do, yeah. So I have, as I say, I shoot some sports back button focused. I shoot some sports front button focused. And the settings, although that's a physical button change, that which is elsewhere, I weirdly save those in the AF settings as well. I'll use a zone focus for certain sports, or I'll use I'll use the single dot maybe 50 to 75% of the time. So to have those, you flick into those quickly, it just makes life a lot easier. Yeah,
they can be quite specific to a particular sport.
Yeah,
because I always remember people getting setting from one photographer. He might have been a motorsports photographer, and then they applied to football and went, "This is rubbish."
I've recently helped a colleague who switched set R1s up, and he asked me to set them up how his previous system was. Helped him set the camera up. I couldn't touch it. I couldn't go near it. I was like, what? Huh? I didn't really. I was like, okay, but have you tried? This is the default settings for the AF settings for the camera. Try this, try that. And it was interesting to see how he slowly, over the period of a few football matches, actually came back to pretty much how the camera is out the box in terms of how certain dials are set up, how the AF is set up.
Thank you, Richard. That was very enlightening and great to talk to you as always.
That's an absolute pleasure. Thanks very much for having me along.
Well, I hope you learned something about sports photography. I know I did. I'll see you next time for another Canon video.